Garrosh is one of the most iconic villains in the entire Warcraft series. All of us are aware of all the bad things he did, but in the light of the recent Garrosh cinematic and his ultimate ending in the Shadowlands, let us actually discuss the good deeds of Garrosh Hellscream. While he of course did many terrible things, he was really not all bad, and in fact he did have many redeeming qualities. So what are some of the good stuff the former Warchief did? Brought to you by Mech Arena, a robot shooter game for your mobile device that is all about skill-based PvP combat. As opposed to many games, Mech Arena's only focus is pitting you against other live players, as that is pretty much what every game mode is about. You have Deathmatch, Capture the Flag, 2v2 and 5v5. If you're familiar with FPS games, you'll fit right in, but the actual combat itself heavily relies on skill and what mech you're playing, and there are many to collect. So with some, you wanna kinda jump around and shuffle left and right, while with others you wanna focus on heavy artillery, staying back and using natural obstacles as cover. Mech Arena has just launched globally, and there are loads of awesome events if you start playing between the 9th and the 19th of August. The game is completely free to play on Android and iOS, so use my personal code to get a black carbon skin, 300 A coins and 50k credits to kickstart your gameplay. You can also add me by the username Doronsmovies. See you in game. Number 10. Plague. While Garrosh was of course no stranger to war crimes, he was particularly opposed to Sylvanas and he never really trusted her. Garrosh knew she started using the plague and he kept a really close watch on her. However, even though he ordered the invasion of Gilneas, when the Forsaken were pushed out, he arrived personally and he was completely disgusted with what he saw. Sylvanas presented him with a new way to regenerate her numbers through resurrection, and Garrosh asked her what difference was now between her and the Lich King. He then entrusted High Warlord Chromash to keep a close eye on her, and he explicitly banned the use of the plague but allowed a significantly weaker version of it. The Forsaken didn't care too much about this order and continued to use the strong strain anyway. However, his orders and reaction go to show that Garrosh wasn't completely just about mindless destruction and suffering. Number 9. Pandaria. Overall, the invasion of Pandaria was objectively not exactly a good deed, as it was especially deadly to the natives and damaging to the land. However, Garrosh was not the leader of the United Nations of Peace, but instead a Warchief of the Horde. And guess what he did as a Warchief of the Horde? He saw that there is a vast undiscovered continent filled with resources, rich and powerful ancient artifacts, and all sorts of potential boosts to the Horde's power. So Garrosh decided to launch a massive invasion and to claim as much of it as he can before the Alliance got their hands on Pandaria first. The campaign was mostly successful and the Horde was significantly strengthened, even getting new allies that can help in the war effort. Of course, he went a bit too far as he extracted the heart of Yashiraj and ruined an entire zone. However, if Garrosh didn't lead the Horde into Pandaria, the Zandalari may have resurrected Lei Shen, and then we would have an entirely different problem on our hands. Number 8. Northrend. Garrosh was one of the leaders, if not really the main Horde person in the Northrend campaign. Now, despite many of his shortcomings in this war, he was still in the thick of it. Garrosh fought against the Scourge, repelled many of their attacks, led offensives, and was ultimately even present in the Ice Crown Citadel in the final attack on the Lich King. However, the bad side is that he quite often actually derailed the campaign, as his main priority was to attack the Alliance instead of combining the forces to battle against the Scourge. To be fair, while it was not solely him that stirred the flames of the conflict, it is safe to say that he was one of the main culprits. However, regardless, he learned quite a bit from this campaign and proved himself as well, being quite crucial to Horde success in the battle against the Lich King. Number 7. Strong military. Garrosh made the military strong. These are just straight out facts that no one can really deny. The difference between the Horde army when it was ruled by Troll and Garrosh is literally night and day. Garrosh employed goblins specifically to build gadgets and all sorts of crazy machinery, but he also completely upped the siege arsenal and really anything army related. While the Korkron were already an elite force, under him they expanded drastically. This is most obvious with him going into alternate Draenor, bringing a few goblins and creating the Iron Horde. He essentially turned the quite primitive Orcish army into a superpower with cannons, elaborate metal armor, guns, and all sorts of weaponry. And do you really know why he was able to do that so quickly on a different planet, like in a matter of months? Because he had already done that with a Horde in the main universe, as he very quickly turned the faction into a military superpower. Too bad most of that was actually destroyed. Number 6. New allies. While Garrosh for sure weakened the Horde by alienating races such as the Tauren and the Trolls, he also, before he went zealous, acquired new allies, therefore strengthening the Horde. First, the Pandarian and the Goblins joined, which is hardly his own actions that led to them becoming a part of the Horde, but he was the Warchief that ultimately had the final word. However, Garrosh is almost solely responsible for bringing the Dragonmaw Orcs into the fold. He essentially freed them from the Fel Orcs that had been ruling them through force, and then offered the Dragonmaw a hand. They were quite critical allies due to their knowledge of dragons that no other race in Azeroth really possessed, as well as experience. Unfortunately though, the Dragonmaw loved Garrosh so much that they were one of his most loyal allies, helping him escape to alternate Draenor and later on start the entire Iron Horde ordeal. Number 5. Architecture. Tying into the military point, not only did Garrosh significantly expand the army, but he essentially renovated and upgraded almost every Horde outpost, as well as the capital of Orgrimmar. Those of you that played back in Wrath of the Lich King and before, you may remember the giant transition when Garrosh became a Warchief, how Orgrimmar turned from a stone, relatively primitive city into a giant hill fortress built from metal and fire, just covered in spikes everywhere. Not only was Orgrimmar made nearly impregnable, but Garrosh created new outposts all across the continent, not just Kalimdor but the eastern kingdoms as well. These outposts are just so obviously completely different from anything that would have been built under Troll's reign. Just look at the difference between Crossroads, for example, and pretty much anything built under Garrosh. And to top it all off, it is not just the better defenses overall, but the infrastructure itself was up to notch as well, making everything much better connected. Number 4. True Orc Warrior. Say what you want about Garrosh, but you can never really call him a coward or weak. This was proved by the ending in Sector Domination, as Garrosh was an orc just through and through, and really proved to be the son of the iron-willed Grom Hellscream. While he was not exactly likable, and in some cases was completely opposite to human and many Azeroth's native races' morals, he was an orc, and orcs, while having a peaceful and shamanistic side, are really a warrior society of conquerors, and are extremely honor-driven, bound by tradition, having strength as their core value. Garrosh was very much like this, and he never really backed down or hid behind his underlings. Sure, yes, it is natural with any leader, he can't be on the front lines all the time, but he was often in the very heat of the battle. He didn't decline the Makkoran against Cairn, nor Troll. He fought against the Alliance, the Scourge, and even carried the heart of Yashirash himself, fighting Teranzu in a duel. The ultimate proof, however, is his ending. He was tortured in most horrific ways in Revendred for years, and ultimately in the Maw as well, yet he still kept his strong will, and he could never really be broken. So, if Garrosh was one thing, he was an Orc Warrior through and through. Number 3. Stonetalon Intervention. This is one of the most iconic scenes, really, in all of Warcraft history. As Garrosh became the Warchief, he was fixated on getting rid of the Alliance and strengthening the Horde in Kalimdor, but one of his generals went a bit overboard. Overlord Kromgar arranged the murder of several neutral druids standing within the Sacred Grove, and then he used a gigantic bomb, probably the biggest one ever used by the time, to completely eradicate the grove, causing many casualties. Garrosh was appalled by these actions, and he teleported himself to Stonetalon, berated Kromgar, and then decided to dismiss him by throwing him off the cliff. Then he gave a speech on how he learned from Saurfang and how he's now learning about mercy. This was overall a really strange scene, as it was so out of character for Garrosh, but even Blizzard themselves confirmed that they purposefully did a 180 on his character later on. At the start of Breath of the Lich King and Cataclysm, he was supposed to be honorable yet cruel and hot-headed but heroic. However, ultimately in the end they just turned him into a complete prideful lunatic, which was as well how he was defeated. Number 2. Makkoran. Tying in with the point of him being a warrior, Garrosh is also quite a duelist. His first Makkoran that we know of was against Troll during the Scourge invasion, but nothing really came out of that. However, as he became Warchief, he was the one that was challenged by Kieran Bloodhoof, and he could have really easily declined it. Garrosh even tried to up the stakes by saying that the Makkoran will be to the death, yet Kieran just proceeded anyway. Then Garrosh won, not because really he was much better in combat, but because Magata Grim Totem had poisoned his blade. When he learned of this, he was infuriated and he felt like he lost his honor, and he completely abandoned Magata, turning hostile against her. Then he faced off against Teranzu in single combat, even though he could have just easily called his elite warriors to simply overwhelm him. Ultimately, Garrosh lost his life in a Makkoran that he really was winning quite easily against Troll, until Troll called upon the elements and just cast lightning upon him. Why this was a good side of him was because really he fought 1v1 every time, he didn't back down, he didn't cheat, and even when he did have the unfair advantage, he regretted it. Lastly, number 1. Iron Horde. This is both a good and a bad point. Bad for us, but good for the Orcish people. So, if you remember, Garrosh escaped his trial, went through a portal to alternate Draenor just as Grommash, his father, was about to drink the blood of Manrot, and he told them all that this was one big scam. Garrosh essentially saved most of the Orcish clans from falling into a demonic trap, got goblins to build them incredibly powerful machinery, and turned them into a super weapon that nearly conquered all of Draenor. This was the good side. The bad was that he still turned them against the Draenei, and the Iron Horde wasn't exactly all that nicer than they would be if they were under the Legion. However, as you may know, the Legion brought terrible consequences upon the Orcs, nearly wiping out, well, most of the race, and giving all of them symptoms of withdrawal, causing them to do unspeakable things, which in this alternate universe, Garrosh prevented. Thank you for watching. Check out the most horrific creations of the Jailer by clicking on the screen, and also check out Doran's Academy for videos on real-world history and science. See you next time.